in healthcare for 15 years before I made the transition into IT. And so my background is varied and a lot of different experiences. And when you pull that all together, it really fits in with this whole thing about innovative culture and growing and learning. So just to start off, I want to verify what we want to talk about. Innovative culture. Culture, a way of thinking, behaving, or working that exists in a place or an organization. That's the definition I took out of the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Edgar Sheen wrote a book, The Corporate Culture Survival Guide. And he says, culture is so stable and difficult to change because it represents the accumulated learning of a group. The ways of thinking, feeling, and perceiving the world that have made the group successful. The important parts of culture are essentially invisible. Okay? Hard to measure, can be observed, but not always. Okay? So this is really tough. The invisibility makes culture hard to understand and analyze. Innovation. What's that? The act or process of introducing new ideas, devices, or methods. Can you see where the challenge is already? Okay? And a lot of the conference, in previous days here, we've talked a lot about change and how to change people. If you listen to Biarte talk yesterday about beyond budgeting, again, it's a cultural shift more than anything else. So this whole thing about lean startup, applying new principles, it's a culture shift, and it's very difficult to do. Okay, two types of culture or innovation. You can have radical innovation, okay, or you can have incremental innovation. Radical basically is a dramatic change that affects large number of people in the way they think. So here we have the Model T. Is that radical or innovative? Anybody shout it out. What do you think? Radical. Okay, why? Why would you say it's radical? It's not a faster horse. Exactly. Not only that, with the advent of cars, if you looked at pictures of archives of cities, there were no sidewalks. Why were there no sidewalks? You didn't need them. There weren't fast-moving objects that could actually kill you going down the road. Okay? The roads were narrow because they only had to accommodate horses and carts, right? And a few people walking around. And today you look at our roads and our infrastructure for accommodating vehicles, and that has radically changed the way we think and act. Okay? Radical or incremental? Incremental, I hear. Why? That was the first one. Hard to tell. Radical. Why do you say radical? Yeah. Yeah. This is a very original iPhone. Yeah. So some would say radical because it really, and I would actually put it in the radical because it really changed the way the way we think with how we communicate with each other. And it wasn't so much about this physical device, it was the operating system behind it, okay, that allowed us to now have apps on our phones and the mobility that it presented to us to be able to do anything, anywhere, okay? Last one. This is a shot of the UK Gov website. So let me tell you the story behind that. In 2002, they started a program to sort of unify all of their websites, okay? And the original inception, the cost was predicted to be 2.3 billion pounds, not dollars. In 2011, they still weren't done. They didn't have any software, working software to show. And the estimated cost of that when the program was canceled was 10 billion pounds already spent. Okay? They still didn't have anything of substance to show. One of the things that they wanted to do with this was to digitized all the health records of all British citizens. And by 2013, only 50% of the health records had been digitized. So they were nowhere near getting finished. So they basically canceled and said, we've got to rethink this. So this is their new website where they actually took all of their previous infrastructures, platforms, and started to consolidate it into one site, one portal for all of British citizens. It took them 12 weeks and £261,000 to have an alpha site that they could test. The beta came up shortly thereafter. They started with 14 people working on it. They're now they fluctuate 100 people. Instead of outsourcing all of their product domain, if I can put it that way, the proprietary information, IP, intellectual property, to some of the big consulting firms, global consulting firms, they actually started to hire developers and product teams internally, okay? In 2013, they estimated they saved $42 million, or pounds, million pounds. 2013, 2014, the estimated savings are 50 million pounds. Is that radical or innovative? Incremental, sorry. Incremental? What's being disrupted? That's a very good question. From the government's perspective, quite radical. Yeah.
How you do the work?
Yeah.
The result?
The result in the culture, how they actually do the work. Yeah. Because before it was just outsource all this and let those guys figure it out. Now we're doing it internally, and we've pulled back the control. But from a tech community perspective, what is that? Customers incremental, they didn't see it. From tech community, us guys in the room, what did you think? Yeah. Well, why not? Why wouldn't you? Yeah. So, you know, it depends on your point of view too, and who's being affected. So just to give you something else to think about, growing an innovative culture. So the ability of your company to be competitive and survive not so much in solutions, but in the people. Okay? And this is what you need to focus on. Forget about the solutions today. Focus on the people. Layers of culture. Any organization will have different layers of culture, and I just want to touch on this. So your visible artifacts are observable aspects. So you'll have your formal and informal organization, you know, how people report up and down to each other and communicate. You'll have structures, processes, how people dress and behave even is observable, okay? And then your exposed values are the things that are written down. So what are our strategy? What are our goals? What's our mission statement? What are our values? Okay? And they should guide decision making as people do day-to-day work. And then the underlying assumptions, those are unconscious beliefs, what people think, what they perceive. Sometimes how they it influences strongly how people act within the organization. Now, what you need is alignment of all three. What do you see in a lot of organizations? The middle one's a joke. We say we do this, but when you look at the artifacts and observe the visible behaviors, there's no match. And that's because the underlying assumptions, there's something happening within the organization that's influencing the underlying assumptions.
Do you put, habits in your
Yeah, habits. What people are bringing in. Yeah, yeah. So with culture, what I want to talk about today, growing an innovative culture, is about three things basically. people, the governance, and your leadership within the organization. So for people, we say focus on growing your talent. Why? Well, technology is just changing too rapidly to try and get the best and the brightest and the smartest within certain technologies all the time. There's just not enough of it to go around. I'm sorry. You know, you got most current technology. Can you go out and hire somebody who has 3 years experience in it? Right? You got to hire people who have the ability to learn and change. So we talk about hiring for aptitude. Can you learn and change? And there's lots of different ways you can test for this when you're hiring for aptitude. I worked for an airline company in Canada called WestJet. It's modeled after Southwest Airlines here in the States. So we always said hire for aptitude, train for skills, and that's a Southwest model too. So when we actually did interviews, we would do a cultural interview amongst the skills. But in particular, when you're hiring for some of the entry-level positions, you would look for personality, and we do a lot of behavioral interviewing, say, tell me a bit of time when, you know, this happened. We do this within ThoughtWorks too. Everybody who comes through ThoughtWorks, you know, we've got the infamous tests that you have to do. You know, the problem if you're a developer, you have to sit and pair with people, so you go through that technical skill set assessment. As well, we do a cultural one. So I've interviewed a lot of developers, testers. I don't know squat about developing, and you know, I couldn't write a line of code if my life depended on it. But we usually sit with these people and we say, are they going to be a good fit for our organization? Okay, and that is really important. But not to discount the mathematics behind that. So this is the Harvard Business Review, and it is May 2014, hot off the press. In hiring, algorithms beat instincts. Okay? So what we say here is that if you map the data points based on interviews and skill sets that people have, the algorithms are a lot better at picking successful candidates than people are. Okay? So your supervisor's rating are higher when people are selected using mathematical algorithms on the data sets got through interviews. Your numbers of promotions are higher for those people. As well, the ability to learn from training is much higher too. So it's a combination when you're hiring for aptitude. Make sure that you don't get misguided by some of the things that an interviewer may say that would make you choose them over somebody who actually might be a better fit. And if you can use the mathematics, you can do it.
But does that apply for any model, or is the model itself?
I think the model itself is important in the growing and retaining talent, because you're going to want these people to learn. So what you want to do is attract the right talent that where they have demonstrated ability to transfer with transferable skills like communication, problem solving, decision making, teamwork, okay? And then the other thing you want to do is look at their ability and willingness to teach as well as learn. Because generally speaking, if you're going to invest a lot of money in this individual, you want them to be able to transfer that again to another, and coach other people and grow the culture as well. So if they're not willing to teach and learn, they're probably not a good fit if you want an innovative culture. Because if you're going to have innovation, people have to be willing to learn. Okay? I don't know. It's just through your interviewing process, you know, how you usually rank people, right? And instead of using, you know, sitting around the table at the end of the day and saying, okay, which candidate did you like the best? You actually have a ranking of all different data points that you've predefined, and then that for attributes that are important for the position, and the mathematical analysis of those data sets are better than your gut feeling is basically what they're saying. Although you still want to look people in the eye and say, you know, do you think I can work with you? Yeah. Assessing skills. So that goes back to the data sets, but use tests for assessing skills. Other things you could do, particularly in the development, technical skills, is supply the technical problem ahead of time and interview to give time to submit, and then you do an analysis of it. Pairing is another with some of your current employees, so get the candidate to come in and sit and talk about the solution they presented, and you look for how they receive and give feedback. That's really important. Whether they're looking for relevant information and whether they produce simple solutions. You know, are they argumentative? Are they stuck in there? Are they very, very set mind as that I approach this the way it's right and you guys are all wrong? So you're looking at the really ability to work and learn and fit within the team. The other thing about people is look for diversity. Okay, so ThoughtWorks is really big on this. We're trying to get 50% of our employees within the female population. Of course, we're multinational, so we have a lot of different nationalities and backgrounds there. We try to hire from the countries where we are located. But what that gives to us is new ways of thinking, okay? My experience my experience as an individual in Canada actually is very different even from, say, somebody who's from the States or Australia. So we moved to Australia 3 years ago. And when we got there, it was kind of like okay, but culturally there were just slight shifts. So one of the things that we noticed was that, you know, we all have, and you can tell by my gray hair that this weighs heavily on my mind some days, so retirement savings. So in Canada we have an RSP, retirement savings plan, registered savings plan. In States you have your 401ks, right? And in Australia they have something called the superannuation. In Australia, the thing about the superannuation is that it's mandatory. People must put a certain percentage of their salary in, and the employer must put a certain percentage of the salary into a superannuation. But when we got there, we go, well, what are our options for, you know, managing this? And they go, well, you just give it to the company and they do it for you. And you go, what? Yeah. And it's something like that. The Australians never considered that people would want to manage their superannuations, or that you'd want to do it digitally. You know, that I'm going to log in and change my portfolio of holdings. And it just, that's a real example about where diversity is really handy, and it start you thinking about different ways to do things. So you come at problems from a different perspective. So if you're on a team, and I'm going to say it, you know, that's all white males, you know, I don't tell you how many times I've been in a room where I'm the only woman. 25 people in the room, I'm the only woman. And you go, there's a problem here. Because if you're trying to solve problems, you usually get a very narrow perspective on what the possible solutions or causes of the problems might be. So that's why you want diversity. And then the last thing about people is you need to encourage the right behaviors. Clear values and goals. Okay, you need to write them down. And I heard somebody say oftentimes it's just a waste of time because nobody pays attention to them. Well, not only do you write them down, but you got to walk the talk. Okay? And you've got to reward the type of behaviors that demonstrate the values and goals. You want to have collaboration. Okay? You want people to be able to talk to each other, and that's about when you're going back to selecting people, finding people you think will be a good fit for the team, people who want to learn. And we want to, about performance management and rewards, recognition and reward systems. And yesterday, Beyond Budgeting, I talked about, the perils of having reward systems for individuals. Okay, you want to have reward systems. If you're going to reward people as a group, you're measuring them on you should have one metric that rolls up within the organization that everybody can be measured on. So when I worked for WestJet, and I think it's similar with Southwest, I'm not sure, but we had a couple of things that happened. Okay, one of them was that I could commit 20% of my gross salary into WestJet shares. WestJet would match it dollar for dollar. So basically, I was buying WestJet shares at 50% off. And after a year, they were fully invested. I could pull the money out. And I go, deal. I just increased my income by 20% by investing in the company. But by investing in the company, now I have an interest in its success, right? I'm now a shareholder. The second thing WestJet did was they said, we will take up to 20% of our net revenues and do a profit share with every employee in the company. Okay? So twice a year, and I worked there for 8 years, and this is an airline in North America. There was only one half year where we didn't make a profit and I didn't get a check. Okay? And for an airline, that's quite remarkable in North America. That is truly remarkable. WestJet's been in business now, 1996 to today, 18 years. They've only really had 2 instances where they made a loss, okay, for that profit share. And that is because people were totally committed to the success of the organization through those types of incentives. Okay? And when we got to budgeting and stuff, it wasn't really whether IT was a cost center or not. It was, well, like, we have this thing called available seat mile. That was our unit of measure. And we all looked at what is our net revenue per available seat mile. And that's what we were all measured on, And it wasn't IT costs. Nobody got measured that way. It was just, if you want to put kiosks in, fine. But that better drive up our revenues. So, you got kiosks instead of people? Okay, kiosks are cheaper, but over here in IT, we got a bigger expense. And we always kept going like that because we had pretty good governance. Okay? So governance to me is about transparency and visibility. The ability to make decisions on real data. Okay? Not assumptions, not perceptions, okay? Not the highest individual paid in the room, okay? You base it on data. And to make that information available to everybody, so Sam's comment earlier when he was presenting about, we had no idea how much our team cost, okay? This is governance. If you know that, you can make better decisions, okay? And you go, wait a minute. Even though we're getting a whole lot per unit, there aren't enough units to even support the team development. And then if we go into ongoing maintenance, is it a long-term viable product? Probably not. So for me, governance is about values and principles over rules. Okay? And thing about values and principles, they should be able to apply in any situation that give people direction on which way to go. Okay? And also that, that sometimes they're just not a right or a wrong. You just got to make the decision based on the circumstance that you're in. That's the nice thing about values and principles over rules. Rules say you have to do it this way all the time. And it gets you into a lot of trouble because a lot of times you're going to go, well, if I do it that way, that might not be the best thing for the organization or it's not best thing for my people. So you got to make that decision. So these are Netflix values, okay? So values are what we value. We value high performance, freedom and responsibility, context not control, highly aligned, loosely coupled. We're going to pay you top of market, and we value promotions and development. Okay? Netflix has the luxury of being built up relatively from the ground with a set of values and leadership that actually hold true to the values. If you're in a larger organization, you may have these values, but you have to ask yourself, are we actually rewarding people who demonstrate these values? And Netflix really, I think they make an effort to actually hold true to these. And one of the things Netflix did, for example, is say, we don't have an expense policy. Okay? If you've got expenses, we'll reimburse you, but it's your decision. Okay? Is that a valid expense? Okay? And you're responsible for that expenditure. So it's a totally different mindset of this command and control. People are always out to do the wrong thing versus I'm going to trust you based on the guidelines that I provide you to do the right thing. And in that type of culture, people then develop the trust and they then start to do the right thing. So the important thing about governance is feedback and measurement. So particularly coming out of the risk and compliance world, measurements are very difficult because people tend to measure activity and inputs over the actual output and value of whatever process or activity that you're doing. So we really emphasize short feedback cycles, okay? As short as you can make them. So from a technology point of view, most of you guys know how to do that. From sort of a management process point of view, it's just keep it moving faster and faster and faster. Coming out of risk and compliance, security code checks. When are those done? Oh, 3 days before we go to production. You know? And my point is, no, that stuff needs to be built in from the beginning. Okay? Developers need to understand what sort of unit tests they can be doing that are related to security requirements. Functional testers, or you've got automated functional tests. Again, what are your security tests that you're building into that? So the idea is you don't have to wait until 3 days before production for security to come back and say, oh, you've got 20 vulnerabilities that you're going to have to fix before you can go. Okay? The same with performance on an organizational level. And yeah, I won't go into too much detail because yesterday in Beyond Budgeting talked a lot about that. What's behind you is behind you. Start to look forward. But you need to, on the performance of the financials, stop catering to what the analysts expect and look at reality and gradually get better and sustain for the long term. Okay? Stop wasting time looking at everything that was done wrong in the past and start looking forward to how you can improve. So instead of quarters, maybe you do monthly. Maybe you do it weekly. Depends on what industry you're in. And then we talked briefly about measuring the right thing. Remember, outputs. The other thing is that, at a lower level, you'll have a lot of different measures. And so a development team, a product team will have different measures than a finance team. Has different measures than a procurement team, right? But the thing is they should all roll up into one unit that the whole organization understands. So going back to WestJet, when we worked there, it was available seat mile. Okay, it all rolled up to that. And that's, from governance, you got to make sure that you're still rolling up and collaborating with other teams to make sure from that end-to-end perspective of the total service your organization is delivering, that you're improving. So I thought I'd throw this in because it is the Lean Startup Series. So we all know about, feedback cycles and talking about performance and ideas, code, data built into build, measure, learn. Okay. A lot of different activities you can do for each of those. You can code faster, measure faster, learn faster. Okay, those are feedback cycles. The important thing to remember about this is just keep it moving. So if you know, what will happen is that for incremental innovation, okay, this works really well. If you're looking for new innovative ideas, so you say, okay, I'm going to have a goal that 20% of my time is spent on innovation. You follow this cycle with very short feedback cycles for new ideas to determine what's going to fly or not. So does anybody in the room have any idea how many, if I say, you guys, let's just throw a bunch of good ideas for a product up on a wall. How many, and we all think they're good. We do a sanity check and say, yep, those are all good ideas. How many of those do you think are really good? Less than 5%. Any other?
Good in the sense that it's actually executed with
It actually delivers value. Yeah, on average. Almost nothing? Yeah, so Microsoft did a little study, and you know, it's Microsoft, so take it what it is. They say 66% of the ideas don't deliver value. Very few of them deliver that, you know, exponential value that you're looking for, which you would look for innovation days and that sort of thing. Most of them are small incremental changes. So 33% are actually going to shoot you in the wrong direction. Not only will they waste your time, but they'll actually cost you money. And 33% are sort of neutral, right? So it's not really moving you forward, but it's not pulling you down, so it's probably a waste of time too. So go figure. Well, most of ideas are wrong. So this pretty much towards the end here, organizational process. So you can have a power-oriented organization, a rule-oriented organization, or performance-oriented organization. And basically, you know, I think are these, Sam, are these presentations going to be available to the attendees? Yeah, so you know, there's a lot of information there, but I'm running out of time. Yeah. And the last thing I want to talk about is leadership, okay? This stuff doesn't work if your leaders don't buy into it. And I got to ask, who in this room would consider themselves a leader? A lot of hands, good. The rest of you, what's stopping you? You come into this, you're learning today? You know, this man, one of the world's greatest leaders, many people consider, was in jail, and he was still a leader of the organization. Okay, even from jail, he was able to lead people. So if he can do it, I mean, we're not all in a position to lead in the same way, but find your own way to lead and change the organization. Get up in the morning and say, what is the one thing I can do today that will help make my life better in the organization? So some things to do. I like this from Jesse Robbins. Don't fight stupid, make more awesome, okay? Just stop trying to beat your head against the wall and make big changes. Just do small incremental changes to help your team get better. You know, yourself get better. Maybe it's, I'm going to get into work 5 minutes earlier so I have more time to get organized. Create time for experimentation. Okay, many organizations have different ways they do this. You know, it's the 20% of your time is, you know, on Fridays, do what you want. We're going to have an innovation day. There's so many different ways to do it. You know, I'm not going to get into this, but it's pick the one that's right for you. The first one doesn't work, try something else. Don't waste your failures. Okay? You learn from everything. In the organization, you have to be able to fail safe, as we call it. Is that you're not punished if you fail, but that's only effective if you learn from the mistake. Okay? You learn from what you did wrong. And then change your own perceptions. or preconceptions. Yeah. And this might be the hardest thing for many of us to do, because we're creatures of habit ourselves. But it starts with the individuals, works as a collective, and eventually the organization becomes innovative. Just think about things differently. Okay. I think I may mention there's cards on the back table for the Lean series if you guys want a discount ordering them through O'Reilly. Are there any questions right now? Yes, in the back.
You mentioned when you were talking about hiring right
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned two things. One is that look for like and plan. And the second thing is that you actively are looking for people from different countries. Neither of those things, as far as I can tell, was proven by research on that. So research by Kabula says that the more women the better, and it doesn't stop at 50-50. And actually, cultural layers work against collective intelligence. So what's your comment on that?
Okay, so 50-50 is our current goal. If we get there, we may go further. Cultural diversity, for us, it's what we need because we are a global company, right? So for us to go into Africa and tell them what they should be doing just doesn't seem right to us. So that's probably, those are things you need to discuss amongst your management team and your workers and figure out what you want to do. But that's what makes sense for us, okay? Any other questions? Yes?
You talked about measuring the right thing. What would you say is measuring the right thing? Is you talking about measuring the output? In Lean, there's quite a bit of focus on also being highly focused on how the process works today in terms of leading indicators, of the lagging indicators that would be the output. Mm-hmm. What's your comment on that?
So it depends on, I always talk about rolling up to the top. So it's output, value, output. So are we getting value out of this? And depending on what you're trying to achieve, what your goals are, that will determine what exact measurement. Now there's also a whole aspect of improving processes. And at that point, you change what you're measuring too. So if you're talking about a process and you have to have the leading and the lagging to be able to improve the process, well, of course you're going to measure those. But when I talk about measuring the right thing, is at the top, you're measuring the value that we're going to give to the customer, essentially, or that the organization is going to get out of that, whether it's out of training and other activities that you're doing. So, but we, measurement and indicators and whatever you use, you have to look at it as you build out or go down. You're going to use a wide variety of different measures. But I always said if you're measuring about how fast you can do things, well, then your throughput actually is important, right? If that's your goal. So you have to relate it back to what you're trying to achieve in the end. And I have no preference. Like sometimes it just makes perfect sense to use the input, a perfect sense to use the output, or maybe the number of activities that you're doing. But when you're measuring value, it's the output to the customer. Any questions? Thank you very much.